session at 5:37 p.m. to address the matters agendized for closed session consideration, and after determining there was no public comment on those matters, you did adjourn into closed session at 5:37. The closed session concluded at 6:34 p.m. and we'll do a written report upon return from closed session consistent with the provisions of Government Code Section 54-957.1. If there are any questions, we're glad to answer them.
Any questions from Ms. Ross? Think not. Thank you, Rob. We'll move on with our agenda this evening. Proclamations and presentations. It's a great pleasure this evening to have a proclamation recognizing March 2022 as American Kid Red Cross Month. Whereas in times of crisis, people in the city of American Canyon come together to care for one another. This humanitarian spirit is part of the foundation of our community and is exemplified by American Red Cross volunteers and donors. And whereas in 1881, Clara Barton founded the American Red Cross, turning her steadfast dedication for helping others into a bold mission of preventing and alleviating people's suffering. Today, more than 140 years later, we honor the kindness and generosity of Red Cross volunteers here in the American Canyon who continue to carry out her life-saving legacy. They join the millions of people across the United States who volunteer, give blood, donate financially, or learn vital life-preserving skills through the Red Cross. And whereas in American Canyon, the contributions of local Red Cross volunteers give hope to the most vulnerable in their darkest hours. Therefore, it's providing emergency shelter, food, and comfort for families devastated by local disasters, like home fires, donations essential blood for accidents and burn victims, heart surgery, and organ transplant patients, and those receiving treatment for leukemia, cancer, or sickle cell disease. Supporting services members and veterans, along with their families, caregivers through unique challenges of military life, helping to save the lives of others with first aid, CPR, and other skills, or delivering international humanitarian aid. And whereas their work to prevent and alleviate human suffering is vital to strengthening our community's resilience, we dedicate this month of March to all those to advance the noble legacy of the American Red Cross founder, Clara Barton, who lived by her words: "You must never think of anything except the need and how to meet it." We ask others to join us. This comment, give back to our community. Now, therefore, be resolved that I, Leon Garcia, Mayor, on behalf of the City of American Canyon City Council, do hereby proclaim March 2022 as American Canyon, as American Red Cross Month, and encourage all citizens in American Canyon to reach out and support this humanitarian mission. Thank you. The agenda changes, Council? No. Accept the motion for the consent calendar.
Mayor Garcia, we have public comments for items send me an email so I have your latest contact information. I'll share some of the information.
Appreciate it, Nathan. Thank you.
You,
Thank you. Any other speakers?
Thank you. I have, Justin has another comment.
Okay.
Justin, go ahead.
Jason, hi, this is Brandon. Maybe okay, I give you my email, see, I give more detail the part two. Because I know the skateboard had no drinking fountain in a baseball play where we near on Dawson Way. We need to redo the track.
yes. Yes, send me an email, Justin. I can give you the latest information.
Yeah, that might be now.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Justin.
Thank you.
Okay, I have no hands raised.
Mr. Mayor, before you proceed, I'd just like to comment. I was contacted by a resident saying that the TV sound is horrible right now. I don't know, I'm not on the television, well, I'm on the TV, but I'm not watching it, but they were saying that it was there. And then, to the speaker, Hugh Marquez, there's a brief preview of the parks upgrades in our State of the City video that's there. So look out for that. It's really cool little roll-up update.
Thank you. Yes. I'll put some further comments on State of the City when we get to that project. Yes. Anything further?
We
let's get right into it. 2021 was a very big year for housing for us. Lots of affordable housing and lots of housing overall. I've broken the entitlements into three parts. Entitlements, which is your planning permits, the building permits issued, and then the certificates of occupancy, which is the final. So in 2021, we had 361 units approved for entitlements. And this includes the Napa Cove project in the middle of town, 291 units in Oakville. And then we had 3 projects from Watson Ranch. Those numbers for the units for Watson Ranch won't be counted in the entitlements because they were previously counted when the entire Watson Ranch was listed in the 2018 housing report. But those projects came back for their design permits in 2021, and they were approved, and they're getting moving forward to their building permits, construction permits. So 361 units for entitlements. And then for the building permits issued, we had 193 units approved. We had 6 ADUs, the Lemos Point project, 186 units. And we also had 1 single family home that was issued in 2021. So still very big numbers for us. And lastly, we have the certificates of occupancy, which are 162 units totally finished and ready to go, which were the 2 ADUs, all of the units in the village of Vintage Ranch. Because I know, like in 2020, they were in like a TCO or temporary certificate of occupancy status. But last year, in 2021, I guess around August, all of the units were completed, and they're ready for people to live in. And then the 1 single-family home that was issued was also finalized last year. So 162 units added overall. So what does this mean? I know Brent mentioned that this is our report card, and one of the most important aspects of the housing report is the RHNA, Regional Housing Needs Allocation, which is a state, I guess it's a requirement that they issue to all the agencies in California. And we were required to provide 392 units, or at least zoned for 392 units. And in 2020, we completed about 385, so we're really close. But of course, for RHNA, they also require different levels of income for the housing. And 2 of the hardest categories to provide were the very low income housing and low income housing. But in 2021, we made a lot of progress. So we added 124 very low housing, very low income housing, and also 66 low income housing. And with those projects, we complied with and exceeded the requirements for RHNA. We're very close to completing everything. We're missing 20 above moderate, basically market rate housing units, but we're most likely going to see those in 2022 with the Watson Ranch single family homes that are in development now. So very good progress overall. I do want to mention like what the Napa County income is in 2021. So the area median income, this is a report that's provided by the state every year in around April. And in April 2021, the area income of a household of 4 is around $109,200. So if you were looking for affordable income housing, you would have to make below the $90,000 if you're a family of 4. And then the state provides this this income sheet every year, and I think in April we'll see an updated version for 2022.
So next, I want to talk about affordable housing. So we do have an affordable housing nexus fee that I try to keep track of every year. In 2019 and 2020, we received quite a lot of housing fees due to our big warehouses that are being developed in the Green Island Industrial Park area. But in 2021, it was a little bit lower than before. We received $8,500 in affordable housing fee, but that's because if the developers provide units, they don't have to provide the fee. So we're lucky to see a lot of affordable housing units being provided by the developers last year. So that's the update for the housing fee. And then the affordable housing permit activity. So we received a lot of affordable housing units in 2021. The Village of Vintage Ranch, which had 159 units overall, provided 16 units of low and very low income for 20 years. And then the Lemos Point Apartments, they received their entitlements and their building permit issuance last year. And that was 186 low and very low income units for 55 years. And lastly, we have the Napa Cove Apartments that is scheduled for 66 low and very low income units for 55 years. So lots of activity there, and hopefully we'll see some more this year as well. We do have some programmatic highlights for 2021 as well. I'll go over 3 of them. The ADU incentives, the city is a part of the partners with the Napa Sonoma ADU Center. We started that, we're part of their program since 2018, I think. And they have a lot of guidance for property owners on how to develop ADUs. And in 2021, they've started to produce standard plans for ADUs that will help folks that are thinking about doing it, and we have some standard plans for them to select in the future. So lots of great stuff in the Napa Sonoma ADU website, including cost estimates and the guides to how to do ADUs. The other item is the affordable housing incentives. The city approved both the Lemos Point and the Napa Cove Apartments with some design standard concessions. I think both of them requested a reduction to their parking requirements, which is a little bit lower than our standards, but it is within the standards of state law. So, and the last part was the rental assistance program. The Housing Authority of the City of Napa, at HACN, helped administer 142 Section 8 vouchers in 2021, of which 34 were for the Valley View senior apartments. So that's the housing efforts. I do want to mention the Housing Authority for Napa. Very grateful for their work in monitoring Section 8 vouchers, as well as providing outreach to affordable housing. They help us administer their owner-occupied rehabilitation program, as well as the first-time home buyers program for low-income applicants. So very grateful for all the work that they help us with, especially in affordable housing. So that was about it for 2021. I have some highlights that I want to go over about this year, what's happening in housing for 2022. So for entitlements, we are going to see more ADUs in the near future. We're about 3 to 4 applications per year. I think we might see an uptick in that this year as well. We have a new project. The residences at Napa Junction is the 15-acre site north of the Reliance apartments. They are proposing 400 apartment units there at market rate. They have submitted their pre-application, and we're expecting their formal application later in April of this year. Another project that we might see is the Sun Square Mixed Use Project. This is 20 one-bedroom units at Napa Junction Road, back of the Walmart. They plan to have those 20 units with I think it's a 15,000 square foot office as well. They've submitted their application in 2021, and we provided first round feedback to them. And they are planning to resubmit sometime in the spring this year. And as for construction permits, building permits, we will see the Watson Ranch lots 14, 15, as well as Watson Ranch lot 10, the single family lots being developed. We most likely see the Oat Hill apartments go to building permits, and also the Napa Cove apartments. And of course, the Canyon Estates project, which is the 35 custom homes north of the high school. They've started grading, and we will hopefully see building permits applied for them as well. And lastly, for construction, these are projects that will already have permits in hand. We expect the Lemos Points project. These are the affordable housing units made from modular units come up in 2022. And same as the Napa Cove apartments, scheduled for 2022 construction. So, and lastly, we have some programmatic features for 2022 as well. We're going to see some Section 8 vouchers for Napa Cove. There's a slew of new housing laws from the state, and one of them is the Senate Bill 9 subdivisions. We're getting some inquiries about this new state law. One of the main things is that it allows single-family home property owners to subdivide their homes if they fulfill the criteria of the state law. We'll learn more about that in this year. And then both item C and D, we're going to see the 6th cycle of the housing element update. We have a presentation after this, so I'm not going to go into that. But we're also going to see the general plan update for land use amendments to make sure that the new housing element is consistent with our new general plan. So that's all I have. It's just all around good news for the housing aspect of the city. If you have any questions for me, I'll be here.
Well, thank you for the presentation. I just had one question. You know, we have exceeded in some areas. Does any of that carry over for the next housing cycle?
Mayor, this is Brent Cooper. There is some that can cycle over to the next housing element cycle. If you'll notice that the housing element effort itself is looking at entitlements, permits, construction. So as they kind of work their way through the process, those projects that are now in entitlement and building permit will likely get their occupancy permit in the next cycle, and those will count.
Okay. Well, very good. I think the speaks also to population growth in American Canyon with those houses occupied and amenities, and certainly impact on services. So council certainly does need to be aware of being able to match that need out there. Likewise with the school district, you know, there's declining school population, but we have increased growth. So depending on, I would assume families will be moving here to American Canyon. So there will be a need to address that need as well. Thank you for the presentation. It's very informative. Good to see. I understand we have achieved a very laudable rank as somewhere in the top 10 in the state, meeting our housing regional requirements. Is that correct?
We would have to submit this first for the next year then they'll do their rankings. It's all due on April 1st, so we'll see how we.
Okay. Well, we got bragging rights, right? Very good. Good job. It's just, it's very exciting to see this all happening for us. Councilmember Joseph, you had your hand up?
Yes. Well, a couple of comments. First of all, as the mayor, I'm impressed at our numbers. Generally, you get your above market rate homes built and you struggle on the low end. And here we've already dramatically exceeded our very low and low. So that's exciting because, you know, building homes is one thing, providing affordability is really where it's at. So I'm very happy over those numbers. Moving forward to the ADUs though, have we done any kind of thinking about incentives more in terms of ensuring that they are also affordable rents? For example, offering some kind of an arrangement for, you know, either permit discounts or connection fee discounts or waivers in exchange for agreeing to affordable rents? Or have we found the ADUs by definition are coming up with affordable rents? The point being, I just want to make sure that those ADUs are adding to our affordable inventory versus just providing high-end add-ons.
I'm going to try to tackle the first part of the question. So when we receive ADUs, we kind of, we require the applicant to provide an income survey to show us how much they think that they're going to charge for rent. And that way we use that, you know, their estimate to see where the ADU would fall within the housing report. And, you know, I've seen many of them, all of them are choosing to be within the low and very low income levels. But the second part of the question, we don't have a special incentives to provide them if they, you know, volunteer to go further and, you know, lock themselves into low income. But it's something to consider.
Well, for now, at least, based on those surveys, it looks like those ADUs are affordable, and
yeah.
So that kind of meets my objective. Yeah, and somewhere down the road, you know, we can lok at it. But good, like I said, a great report, good numbers.
And Councilmember Joseph, I could also just kind of add a little extra information too on the subject. The city has adopted. There is an exemption of water capacity fees for ADUs. There's a reduction in other impact fees. The heroes at the Napa Sonoma ADU Center have provided tremendous resources to lower the cost of ADUs with pre-approved plans. They have webinars and seminars to help educate homeowners. So there's a lot of resources that are available, but it is possible that there could be further incentives. Those are quite likely to be discussed in our upcoming housing element as a possibility. I know the city of Napa, our friends to the north, at some point allocated funds from the city to help pay for, defray the cost of accessory dwelling units in return for guarantees of lower income affordability. So those are things that we haven't pursued, but those are possibilities.
Okay,
Thanks.
Councilmember Oro?
Yeah, thank you for that report. I'm encouraged to see that. I'm glad I'm not a city that's behind on their housing element or their housing requirements. I think it's going to add, you know, obviously adds more people, but it brings more life to the city as well. And for things that citizens are looking for in terms of places to eat, places to shop, things to do, that is all enhanced by this as well. Of course, there will be some growing pains along the way, but I think it's understood. For me in particular, housing is not going to get better until we build more housing. It literally is not going to happen. We're short on housing. It's one of the major crises in California. And, there's a thing on American Canyon Happenings Facebook page today talking specifically about rents in and around the area being extremely high. They're pointing the finger at the city, but the city does not control the market for housing. We do help out by building more housing, and more municipalities in the state of California ought to build more housing. It's really hard to do here in California. For those of you that are on that Facebook thread and are commenting, I'm going to invite Mr. Cooper now to talk about the housing element plan and to participate in the survey and have your voices be heard. I'll let you do that, Mr. Cooper.
Well, we'll actually be having a presentation on the upcoming housing element too, following this item. But the city does have a web page for the housing element, and we do have a survey of our residents, both in English and Spanish. And it's inquiring about what are your priorities for housing, some of the concerns or issues. As policymakers here on the City Council, this survey is intended to help provide information and feedback on what direction the housing element should go to make sure that it's relevant and meaningful. We'll have web links and things at our next presentation. So if I've piqued your interest, we'll have places where you can make a note of it.
Very good, thank you. Councilmember Washington. You're muted, sir.
I would have figured that out by now. But yeah, I want to piggyback on what Councilmember Oral just brought up, because that's actually why I even raised my hand. I saw today in that post in American Canyon Happenings that there were comments about the city, what's the city doing for affordable housing? So, and just quoting what they say. So thank you, Brent, for even addressing that. And I'll forward you that link so you at least have the ability to put in some of those links for the people on that thread, because it's a thread that's growing pretty rapidly. So thank you for that. And I want to say thanks for the presentation today. I think it's really important. I'm encouraging people to come to the city council meetings just to listen and to get some of these answers, and not just use the social outlets to make statements that may not be factual. Come on and listen to what's going on in the city council, so encouraging that in our people. But my quick question is, where do we obtain that ADU survey for residents or for future residents to try to be able to obtain some of the opportunities or the benefits that are associated with that?
Councilmember Washington, we have our survey on our website. I know Jen Kanzenbach has been terrific. She's been posting both in our newsletters for the city manager and for our community development department around town, also on Facebook. So there is, it's kind of getting pushed out there to make it easy to find the surveys, but we also have a website as well that has those links as well. I'm not sure if I answered your question entirely.
You did, and I agree. Jen does a great job. I typically, when I see something posted by her, I'll take it and repost it so everybody can see it. Yeah, she does a great job.
And she will be posting these regularly, getting them pushed out on kind of a regular basis. I know that people don't necessarily tune in to one thing or another all the time. So try to refresh message so that we can get sort of responses. And we've had a pretty good response already. The last I looked a few days ago, we had 35 responses. I haven't checked in just up to date, but it's definitely working.
Yeah, and I know a few of us on the council are social media savvy. So anything we could do to help get the message out, please use us as a tool.
Thank you. It's like a comment too. I think so mentioned earlier in my remarks, the opportunity for growth. With affordable housing, we're able to attract industry to American Canyon. I think I commented in the last meeting about Redwood Credit Union. My understanding from talking with their representatives that they're moving their corporate headquarters from Santa Rosa to the airport area. 700 employees will be there. At some point they'll reach 2,100. That's a very attractive area for them. part of that is because of, well, proximity to the Bay Area and housing that's going on in American Canyon. So we can expect to see our population grow with that. I talked with a couple of guys that had a video recording business over there at the job fair that the Chamber of Commerce put together. Yeah, they're over there right next to Redwood Credit Union, where they're building their corporate office building. They live here in American Canyon, and their commute time is 8 minutes. So that's something that's also attractive to people, I think. I think a lot of what we're experiencing is the fatigue of being stuck for an hour and a half each direction going to and from work. And I think the opportunity for American Canyon is going to be a lot more people who desire to live closer to where they work. On the ADU part of it, I think I visited some time ago Lennar's project in Vallejo, out on Mare Island. They have a, you know, the ADUs can be detached or they can be incorporated in the house. And the one models they had it incorporated into the house. The idea being when you're young and have a big family, you live in the big house and you rent out the smaller unit. When you're an empty nester, you reverse roles. And it seems to be a very interesting design and the way it was presented. Very nicely constructed. And I'm sure there may be a market for something like that. Either that, you have the in-law unit built right into your home. So thank you for the presentation. That's good news to hear. I'm just, I think we're all really excited about the growth we're having. Certainly bragging rights, they have exceeded and achieved what is very hard to do for a lot of jurisdictions. But I do think we need to stay tuned to the impacts. It's going to be issues like traffic. It's going to be issues like school. It's going to be issues like public safety. Solely for police, fire. And those need to be on our to-do list as well to examine those. I'm sure we will. So thank you for the presentation this evening. Very informative. Anything further? Public comment on this matter? All I'm saying, a public hearing is open. This is a public hearing.
Thank you. We have no written comment. We haven't received any written comments on this item. I have Hugh Marquez. And go ahead, Hugh.
Hello, Mayor and City Council again.
Good evening.
I don't know if this is part of it, but the Napa Cove Apartments, I'm just curious. It was my understanding that there was supposed to be an exit on 29 and that's been removed. Is that part of this discussion, or is that another discussion for me to have? Because I was informed that, and I don't know how true it is, that when they did the Napa Cove apartments, that they were going to have an exit going on 29 and Melvin was going to be a secondary. And I've since heard that the exit on 29 is not going to go on 29 and that the exit on Melvin will be the primary. And I'm just concerned about all the traffic. While I'm glad we're having apartments, I know there are some that aren't. I'm glad that we are getting some affordable lower income houses. But I'm just curious about the traffic on the other side of the road towards the housing. Is this the appropriate time to talk about that?
Oh,
so I can, I'm sorry, Mayor?
Go ahead, Mr. Cooper.
Initially, the application included an entrance and exit onto Highway 29. You probably, because you're kind of plugged into what's going on in town, familiar with the Highway 29 corridor plan that the NVTA in partnership with the city is working on. And at the same time, of course, this application is moving through along with conversations with the corridor plan. The corridor plan is looking at reducing the number of driveway entrances onto Highway 29 to help facilitate congestion relief and smooth traffic flow. And so after the application was submitted, we received a letter from the NVTA recommending that the access onto the highway be removed in an effort to help provide facilitate the goals of the Highway 29 corridor plan. There's also plans for 10-foot bike plan and pedestrian, which this project will help build along their frontage. And having cars enter and exit is also a safety issue. So the entrance for this project is off of Melvin. There are traffic calming efforts underway as we speak to help address that long-standing issue. But if you were to take a look at the traffic studies, the contribution of vehicles onto Melvin from this project is very small in comparison to the existing traffic that uses it today. And so we covered this extensively during the Planning Commission hearing. The objective is to calm the traffic on Melvin, but recognize that this project isn't creating a lot of traffic, but also it is providing traffic impact fees that'll help fund some of those solutions to traffic mitigation. So I know I've thrown a lot of information at you, but the new project is helping to contribute to solutions, but it is a comparatively small contributor to traffic on Melvin Road.
Okay, thank you, Brent.
Do we have another speaker?
I have no other hands raised.
Of course.
Okay, then I will close public hearing this time, return to council for this discussion, desired action. Yeah, at one point, I think I raised it at a previous meeting, safe route to school from the code project. You know, there's obviously a need for sidewalks, particularly probably the easiest one would be on the east side that connects to the one that goes down toward Dallas Way for kids going to school. But also, you know, sidewalks, if folks wants to, they could use that route also for shopping. Probably need something to address something at some point, going north and out to Teresa and Real Del Mar. But yeah, that's the concern that has come up with that type of project.
Mayor, you'll actually see, the council will actually see something on this at our next meeting. We're looking at forward some recommendations for use of the ARPA funding the city has received based on some workshop we had last month. So included in that comment, included in that discussion at our next meeting will be a project of using some of that funding for what you just described.
Good, thank you. Hey, this is an information item. No action needed. Right. Very good. Anything further questions or discussion from council? We'll move on to the next item then. Seeing none. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thanks, Brent. Thanks, William. Great job.
Yeah, wow. Applause. Okay, public hearing. We'll move on now to item 10, Laborers International Union of North America, Local 324, LIUNA appeal.
Thank you, Mayor. Actually, William's going to stay on, and between William and Bill are going to kind of cover this this item.
I'm going to put William back in. I thought Brent was handling that. Let me, sorry. Okay. William's coming back.
Hi. Good evening, everyone. So just a quick update on this project. This is in regards to the appeal to the SDG 217 Commerce project. The last we heard was that the applicant, the project applicant needed more time to review a court case in conjunction to preparing their environmental response. And in February, the applicant requested an additional continuance, and that's the basis of today's actions. They requested a 6-month continuance so that they have more time to complete their environmental studies.
Okay, any questions or discussion from council? If not, I will open public comment on this matter. Public comment is open. That we received.
We have received no written comment, and I see no hands raised.
Very good, thank you. That being said, I'll close public comment and we'll return to council for discussion and action.
I'll make a motion.
Yeah, go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make a motion to continue this item to September 6th, 2022.
And I'll second.
Which is a second. Roll call, please.
Okay, Councilmember Joseph,
Yes.
Councilmember Oro,
Yes.
Councilmember Washington,
Yes.
and Mayor Garcia.
Yes. Thank you, council. We'll move now on to our business items. Item 11, sixth cycle housing element update presentation. Dealing a lot with housing this evening.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor, and council members and members of the public. Brent Cooper, Community Development Director, and we are launching into our next housing element. This is, of course, as we just discussed, required by the state to be updated every 8 years. And so this is the time. We're very lucky tonight. We have a presentation by Luke Lindenbush. He's with the Napa-Sonoma Collaborative. So for the first time ever, the Association of Bay Area Governments has funded an organization that will help all the jurisdictions in Napa and Sonoma County with their background information for the housing element, because it's much more rigorous this time around than it was 8 years ago. And so along with that rigor has come some assistance. And so we're very grateful to have Luke here to help kind of go through what is the housing element and what does this update mean. And I see he's already got it queued up here. And so I'll stop talking and I'll turn it over to Luke.
Great. Thank you so much for the introduction, Brent. And good evening, Mayor Garcia, Council, and members.
Good evening. Welcome.
My name is Luke Lindenbush, and I'm a housing policy planner with the Napa-Sonoma Collaborative here to present an update and a workshop on your housing element update for the sixth cycle this evening. So an overview of what we'll be going over tonight, just giving you a bit of an overview of the housing element process, RHNA, what's changed since last time, going into the sites inventory process and other new laws, going really quickly through some select American Canyon demographics, and then addressing the project timeline, next steps, getting some time for questions, discussion, and community input as well. So before I go into that, a little bit about the Napa-Sonoma Subregional Housing Collaborative, which is a new effort funded by Subregional Technical through ABAG, the Association of Bay Area Governments. And really, this is an effort that has been formed, not a formal nonprofit organization, but a connection between the 16 organizations that comprise the jurisdictions of the 14 cities and towns of Napa and Sonoma counties and the 2 counties, in a process to share information, collaboration, best practices, and resources in completing the sixth cycle housing element. As I mentioned, there's a lot of new requirements that every jurisdiction has to go through in fulfilling this process. And we're hoping that through this process of working collaboratively, that we're going to be able to do it better together. And some of the points of technical assistance that we're providing include a regional fair housing analysis with an AFFH section tailored to each city, town, and county. We'll go a little bit through this presentation as to some of the new requirements for fair housing and why it's going to weigh heavily on the sixth cycle housing element as well. In addition, the Napa-Sonoma Collaborative has convened an equity working group with membership from the 2 counties to make sure that we're performing a diligent and effective outreach to our hardest to reach communities and making sure that they're along for the process. And lastly, but not lastly, but in terms of the overview that we're giving tonight, we also have a developer panel that's able to validate some of the sites that are detailed in the site selection for each jurisdiction. So just a little bit of an overview of the context of where American Canyon is at with its general plan and with its housing element. This is led by a team at the City of American Canyon listed here. And I'll also note that I'm personally not one of your contracted consultants for the housing element, but you're in good hands with 2 consultants that we work with regularly and hold in high regard with Rincon Consultants and Mintier Harnish. So really the collaborative is here to supplement the work done by your city and your city staff and by your consultants in this housing element process. And also listed here, as mentioned by Brent earlier, is the website for the housing element update and the general plan, and the community survey, a bilingual community survey on housing needs and opportunities for the housing element. So before I go into some of the other elements of the housing element, I want to just provide some screen grabs from our website, nsc-housing.org, looking at really what the need is and where we're at and where we're coming into in this 6th cycle. We can see that housing is expensive in the North Bay and it's only getting more expensive. And the graph on the left shows that low-wage jobs dramatically outpace the number of affordable homes that are available to renters and buyers alike. And additionally, we know that sustainable options are needed in the wake of the pandemic and other disasters that we deal with here in the North Bay, including wildfires. So this is an acute need that is growing more compressed with every day, and affordable housing is something that looms large over this housing element cycle. Additionally, not everyone who qualifies for who needs affordable housing qualifies for programs. So we'll see as we go through some of the demographics, just the scale of the extent of this problem, not just for the most extremely low and very low income residents of Napa and Sonoma counties, but we're also seeing an increasing unaffordability of housing for people at and above area median income. So not everyone qualifies for affordable housing, and those who do qualify for affordable housing are not always able to move into it because of extremely long wait lists. Housing providers. Additionally, we know that whether you're in deed restricted affordable housing or not, affordable rent is hard to find and getting harder. So now going into the process of the housing element itself, as Brent mentioned, this a portion of the general plan that covers an 8-year planning period from 2023 to 2031. And this one is a little bit different, but it still has the same constitutive elements, one of which is a sites inventory, looking at where you're going to respond to the regional housing needs allocation and where you're going to zone sites to be able to accommodate your RHNA over the 8-cycle planning period. Additionally, there is a statutorily required implementing program of policies and programs that are implemented through the housing element as well. You can't just zone for your sites, you also have to have policies and programs that indicate that you're going to be able to get that housing built and do it at the affordability levels that are prescribed by RHNA. In addition to that, we see that there are a number of statutory requirements as well that go beyond sort of these nuts and bolts of the housing element. One of the newer ones is affirmatively furthering fair housing, which is already proven to be a really strong component and highly and a component of the housing element. The jurisdictions are getting a lot of feedback from HCD on, so we're going to go into that in this presentation as well. Part of it is also reviewing the 5th cycle housing element and revising it as necessary to meet new and expanded statutory requirements. Additionally, every jurisdiction needs to identify constraints to building housing within your community, both governmental constraints and non-governmental constraints, such as the natural environment. So the regional housing needs determination is this big number. In the last cycle, it was the big number that was determined by the state that the Bay Area had to zone for 188,000 housing units. In this cycle, we see that there's a dramatic increase of about 135%. The majority of this is for affordable housing, and it's reflective, as mentioned before, of the crisis of housing affordability that we're dealing with around the state. And we're seeing that this increase is comparable on scale around the state, but a little bit higher in the Bay Area overall. Putting that in context with the rest of the RHNA figures for the County of Napa, American Canyon has that big number of 446 homes that need to be zoned for. Also just acknowledging as well that it's not just about that big number, but being able to zone for the fair share of regions identified housing needs, and that more than half of that number is very low and moderate income, deed restricted affordable housing. And those affordability assumptions in the site analysis are linked to density and zoning, which we'll get a little bit more into. So looking at the RHNA process and timeline, we're now past this, but just a little bit of background for anyone who's not fully familiar with the process, how we get from this big number of 441,000 units and get to 446 for American Canyon. So ABAG, the Association of Bay Area Governments, had a housing methodology committee that figured out how to divide all of this up. That was voted on and approved in winter 2020. Through 2021, it was reviewed. There were a number of appeals. beyond that, and beyond the rejection of the appeals across the Bay Area, there have also have been voluntary swaps that have occurred between counties and cities, and American Canyon has also engaged in those. So we have the final RHNA allocation, but as noted at the end of 2021 and ongoing through the development of the housing element process, cities can agree to take some RHNA from their county until the housing element due date in January 2023. So another way of looking at that, at the RHNA and housing element, we have the development of RHNA. Every city and county receives their share. They have to receive certification of the housing element by HCD to fulfill this process. And then when certification is achieved, jurisdictions can retain the validity of local control and avoid being sued by the state. Speaking of being sued by the state, we're going to go into some new state housing laws now. This is really just to acknowledge the scale of the programs that have been required to be implemented through the housing element and a number of other areas that have been impacted in the housing element since the last cycle. So we're hearing a lot from a lot of people who have been involved with this process for many cycles that this is really nothing like anything they've seen before. Largely because there's a number of areas where the laws are just now being implemented for the first time. So we're learning a lot from Southern California, who's about 6 months ahead on this process. And then we're also going through and getting more laws all the time. So we're looking such as AB 215, such as SB 9, as was talked about earlier, that were just implemented this year. So this is really just to acknowledge the scale of some of those legal requirements that are evolving through the process. Going into some of the benefits and importance of HCD certification, hearing about the progress that American Canyon is making, I'm not too worried about American Canyon getting a certified housing element or needing to be too worried about this, but it is really important to acknowledge just the importance of certification, especially given new laws, avoiding litigation, avoiding the potential for the Attorney General to be involved, for HCD to be involved in litigation against cities and towns. And this is really the way that cities are able to maintain their discretionary review, their local control over their housing projects. It's also important to have a certified housing element to make sure to remain eligible for state funding, not just for housing, but for all kinds of infrastructural improvements, including parks, transit, et cetera. Going into the AB 1397, which is really the housing element law as it's been updated in recent years. This is the inventory of housing sites. It's a requirement that every jurisdiction identify an inventory of land that is both suitable and available. The default density for cities in Napa County is 20 units per acre. So this is the density that is required for a site to be included in a jurisdiction's housing element sites inventory, with the exception that if the local jurisdiction provides strong justification that these sites are going to be able to be developed at lower densities, they can be included. And that's based on past history of how the city has developed. Additionally, these sites have to meet new state requirements for a variety of purposes, including fair housing. And there needs to be a strong justification to include non-vacant sites in an inventory. A non-vacant site being anything other than completely vacant land. It could even include a parking lot is considered non-vacant in some instances. So really looking at these sites and making sure, if it's been included in the last couple of cycles, there are new laws that require strong justification as well. So part of that is where that developer panel comes in, and I can go into that a little bit more later as well. Going into one of the other new cornerstone policies of the housing element is affirmatively furthering fair housing. This was originally instated as an Obama administration provision and bolstered in the state of California in 2018 by Assembly Bill 686. And what affirmatively furthering fair housing states is that programs have to constitute meaningful actions to address the disparities in housing needs and access to opportunity in a community. Basically, a jurisdiction has to actively have programs further fair housing and ensure that across the housing element, there isn't anything that's being done to undermine fair housing in the community as well. So part of this in regard to sites is ensuring that lower income housing, sites that are zoned for affordable housing, are dispersed throughout the community, that they're not concentrated in high opportunity areas or higher opportunity areas, and that sites that are zoned in lower income areas according to maps that come out from the state need to be accompanied by infrastructure, whether it's good schools, good jobs, everything that would be part and would be a defining part of a higher resource neighborhood. So really looking at some of the laws and how they implicate the goals of the housing element and the data that's needed with the housing sites inventory. There's this requirement that I mentioned about reusing sites. So the goal here is that in order to make sure that sites that have been used in prior cycles can be used, it has to be identified that they're feasible for development, that developers and builders and property owners are actually interested in having them developed. And in that instance, they can be used in the housing sites inventory. Additionally, there's a law that says that sites below a half acre or larger than 10 acres aren't feasible for affordable housing in particular. So that's another area where developers would come in. If you have a site that's less than half an acre, but there are circumstances that lead the city to believe that it would be feasible for affordable housing, it can still be included in the sites inventory. There just needs to be some justification. And lastly, looking at affirmatively furthering fair housing, sites do need to be dispersed throughout the community. And the goal here is to make sure that to identify concentrated areas of poverty and pair those areas and any sites that are identified in lower resource neighborhoods with anti-displacement policies, other programs that affirmatively further fair housing, really. So the conundrum here with the sites is that as RHNA gets much, much bigger, the amount of sites that you can use gets smaller. Another point to this end is with no net loss. So the concept of no net loss is essentially that you have your RHNA of 446, right? We wouldn't recommend saying that you should zone for exactly 446 units, because if one of those parcels that is in your site's inventory to accommodate your RHNA develops as something else, say that it has flexible zoning and it can be used for commercial, or it's mixed use and you have more commercial because you're fulfilling other community desires, like having a stronger workforce in American Canyon, or say that you have it zoned for density and it's lower, or you have a different affordability. This would potentially, if you were right on the edge of your RHNA, bring you out of housing element compliance. So it's really important to regard the 446 number as a benchmark and have a little bit of a buffer to make sure that you don't lose housing element compliance. So really the goal here is to make sure that you have an adequate supply of appropriate zoned land throughout the entire 8-year housing element period. And that's where the previous item of the APR comes in. So the APR can adjust your housing element list throughout the housing element period as things change. So really just making sure that you have a plan that is flexible to this and that you have adequately zoned sites with every year, because the state is checking to make sure that your inventory remains valid with every year. And as long as you do this, then according to the rules of AB 72, you'll avoid being sued by the Attorney General of California. Again, on that point, looking at the expanded enforcement authority, this was really largely put forth by AB 72, but one that was passed this year expanded the list of ways in which the state of California has recourse to litigate against jurisdictions that are not in compliance with their housing laws. So this gives really HCD a broader authority to make sure that jurisdictions are implementing their housing elements. In extreme cases, HCD may actually even revoke compliance of a housing element. And HCD can refer cases to the Attorney General if they are out of compliance with the housing element law itself, with other provisions like the Housing Accountability Act, the no net loss law we just discussed, the density bonus law, anti-discrimination laws provided by AB 686 and affirmatively furthering fair housing. And the new ones stipulated by AB 215 is that jurisdictions, if you don't meet your housing element deadline of January 31st of next year, then any rezoning that has to be done to accommodate the site's inventory needs to be completed within 1 year. AB 215 also allows HCD to refer cities to the Attorney General that aren't in compliance with SB 35 and other streamlining measures, and incorporating FH specifically in the site's inventory. In the statutory requirement participation, outreach and community engagement is important to any successful housing element. Even if it weren't statutorily required, it would be important to make sure that we're hearing from every member of the community in each of these documents that are produced. However, it's also a statutory requirement of the housing element that there has to be meaningful community engagement throughout the process, and that really every part of the process that goes into making the housing element needs to be well documented, and the comments need to be incorporated. Not every single comment that's made on the surveys has to impact the outcome of the document, but there has to be some understanding of how it was assessed, whether it was applicable, and whether it was considered ultimately. So again, going a bit into some of the select demographics for American Canyon. I know this council knows the city well, so I'll try to not spend too much time on each slide, but just really go through this to provide a sense of where American Canyon is at, in particular in comparison to the region, to get a sense of what some of the housing needs are. Most of this data comes from the American Community Survey, the most recent census, and HUD. So looking at population trends, obviously a really steep increase since incorporation that is difficult to compare to the rest of the Bay Area. Looking at population by race, seeing just the differences in comparison between the different years in American Canyon, and that we have diversifying population in American Canyon as well. Population by race, also seeing that there is a larger Asian population in American Canyon compared to Napa County, with demographics more consistent with the broader Bay Area. In terms of population of resource areas by race, we see that there are two resource areas in American Canyon based on the maps, low resource and moderate resource. So this will be the two areas to consider in terms of making sure that there is dispersion of affordable housing throughout the community and that it's not creating any undue racial disparities. Looking at population age trends, again, every group has gone up since incorporation, but we do see, as echoed in earlier comments, that there is a slight decrease in children under the age of 14 in the population age trends, contributing in part to declining enrollment, and that like every other community in the Bay Area, there's also an increasing population on the higher end, and that we have an aging population. Households by the presence of children, we see that American Canyon has half of its houses with kids in it, which is much higher than the about third, little under a third in Napa County and the Bay Area as a whole. Disability by type, this is important to acknowledge in terms of housing needs and how to address housing needs. And we see that in American Canyon, there's about 6% of residents, all adult residents with an ambulatory difficulty and a number of other disabilities as well to take into account. Household by tenure, we see that American Canyon has 77% owner-occupied units, higher than Napa County and much higher than the Bay Area as a whole. In terms of housing tenure by age, we see that a majority of American Canyon residents are homeowners. The only one that isn't a majority are young adults aged 25 to 34. And in terms of housing tenure by housing type, a majority of single-family homes, the prominent housing typology in American Canyon is owned, and that 100% of multifamily housing is rented. So no condos according to this data. And looking at household type here as well, seeing generally more families in American Canyon and about half the amount of single person households compared to Napa County and the rest of the Bay Area. Housing units by number of bedrooms, again, really seeing the most prominent housing typology is 3 to 4 bedroom single family homes, and the majority of them are owned. Households by household size, again, consistent with that prior data, looking at about half the amount of 1 person households, about consistent amount of 3 to 4 person households, a little bit higher, and about double the amount of 5 person or more households in American Canyon. And looking at households by household income level, roughly consistent with the rest of the Bay Area and Napa County, with a higher share of people above, at market rate, above moderate income. And looking at cost burden by tenure, this is looking at how many people are paying more than 30% of their income on housing. So we see about a quarter of renters are cost burdened, split pretty evenly between being severely cost burdened at more than 50% and between 30 to 50. And we see that 55%, as much as 55% of renters are burdened by the cost of housing in American Canyon. And again, looking at the cost burden by income level, a large majority of extremely low income households are cost burdened, and about half of very low, and moderate income households are burdened by the cost of housing, with even about 10% of those above moderate income burdened by the cost of housing as well. So now going into just looking at some of the housing element needs, broad overview of what we've covered already. There's the identified housing needs in RHNA, how to fulfill those regional obligations for zoning for housing. There are the statutory requirements, new laws, and affirmatively furthering fair housing that impact the 6-cycle housing element. There's the statutory requirements and moral imperative community input to have a robust housing element. And then there are policies, programs, and sites that implement the housing element itself. So some of the project objectives of the 2023 housing element update are to really meet local housing needs. There's a lot that's been covered in terms of the imperative on a state level, and we spend a lot of time talking about laws of local and the sort of mandates that every jurisdiction has to work with. But really, this is an opportunity for every jurisdiction to have a program, have programs and policies within their housing element that are uniquely tailored and specifically tailored to their community. So this is an opportunity just as much as it is a requirement for American Canyon to meet its community needs. In addition, the objective is to ensure adequate sites. Really, no one wants to be on that tight rezoning requirement. So it's important to ensure that there's an adequate inventory of sites to accommodate RHNA with some flexibility. And it's not just all about the sites in terms of meeting that number either. More and more creative policies allow a broader range of options when you're ensuring your sites, and also will allow for greater defensibility when seeking certification with HCD. And of course, all of these sites do have to be reviewed once again with a fair housing lens. And if all of this is achieved, then American Canyon will achieve state certification. Looking at the next steps for the housing element process, we have outreach and community input ongoing with that survey. Ongoing for your consultant team and staff is going to be data collection, looking at issues, constraints, opportunities, developing the text of the housing element itself. In addition, there will be a draft housing strategy and preliminary sites inventory that's looking at the sites and the programs and policies before the preparation of the draft housing element itself. In addition, there will be a fair housing analysis informed by the regional fair housing analysis conducted by the Napa-Sonoma Collaborative, and an AFFH program of actions in there as well. And then after a draft housing element and public review, there will be an HCD review and adoption hearings at the top of next year. So looking at where we are now, some of this might be a little bit ahead of the collaborative workshop, but really this is just another way of looking at our timeline here for this housing element cycle. Every single purple dot on this timeline is an opportunity for community input. So there might be a handful of community workshops at the Planning Commission, at the City Council, but really every time one of these documents is released for review, there's an opportunity for members of the public to comment on it as well. In addition to all of the outreach that's being layered into the entire process. So there's the community surveys, stakeholder interviews that are conducted as part of outreach, data collection, beginning the housing strategy, again, CEQA documentation, looking at the environmental review of this, making revisions as needed as these reviews are open to the public and come back from HCD, and then hearings to adopt. So with that, we'll open it up for questions, discussion, and public comment. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Presentation. Excuse me. Wow, that's an awful lot of information to absorb. But I'm very encouraged with what we're doing in American Canyon. We're fortunate we have the land to build on. Serving on the ABAG exec board, with that process of dealing with the RHNA allocation numbers. Unfortunately, some areas, cities north of us in this county, they're very constrained with their city limit line, and that's going to be a very big challenge for them. But like as with Napa County, with their restrictions of housing in the agriculture areas, we were able to work out arrangements with them to take some of that allocation for them. Certainly was very helpful with the affordable housing for Beth Valley View. Certainly a lot of the and having a place for many veterans who were homeless at one time. So the challenges are there. I'm just happy that American Canyon is in a position to be able to meet those. And certainly something we have desired to do in American Canyon is grow our community. With that, Councilmember Washington, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And wow, like you said, wow, Luke, more of a statement than anything. You've obviously done your homework on American Canyon, so thank you for your thorough presentations. And I like the visual matrix that you provided. I also like the intro that you gave at the beginning. You are in good hands. For a second, I thought that deep voice spokesman, I think his name is Dennis Hybert, was going to show up and appear on the presentation. But the housing element, basically, I guess what I'm taking from this is just an equal housing opportunity, and it's designed to just educate our community, ourselves, on the values of the diversity of our neighborhood. So that's my takeaway from this. But again, like I said, excellent presentation, and thank you.
Councilmember Joseph?
Yes, I'll agree with the other two speakers. You gave us a boatload of data, and it was very, very informative. A couple of clarifying questions. First being, in addition to the 446 units we've got to come up with, we're also required to help out the county for another 160 or something. So we really have to come up with a little over 600 units. So it's a little more of a challenge than just meeting our RHNA numbers.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just clarifying. The other one is qualitative. One of your main points is that the housing element has got a whole bunch of new laws and obligations. So relatively speaking, is it, 50% harder, 100% harder, to go through the process, more so than, to me, the nuts and bolts is the sites analysis. Do we have the available sites to meet these numbers? And then how do we go about facilitating it? And given our track record, I think we're in a position, as the mayor said, to a little bit of bragging rights to say, we can deliver. But the rest of the process, how much of a burden does that put on our staff or on the Napa Sonoma Collaborative? How much more effort is this just to go through the new processes?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's a little different for every jurisdiction. I will acknowledge, though, that from what we're seeing from Southern California, we're learning a lot from Southern California as they went through the process before us. We're learning a lot from Sacramento region as well, getting those comments back. And at the very top of those comments that are coming back from HCD are surrounding the affirmatively furthering fair housing goals, just because it's the newest component. And it's not entirely always clear, where jurisdictions need to really actively affirmatively further fair housing, and also where it needs to be integrated throughout the entire document. So that's the area where there's been the highest level of scrutiny. And with every aspect of it really that's new, it's every single day, HCD is refining their process and understanding for how to best meet the needs of jurisdictions and also how to best assess jurisdictions. So it's a little bit touch and go, but I think with American Canyon and its track record, it'll be in good shape to be able to handle every aspect of the 6-cycle housing element.
Okay, thanks. I suppose at some point we should ask Brent and William what their take on the workload is, but we'll get that later.
Okay, thank you. Any other comment from council? This is, I'll open up public comment then. Public comment on this matter.
We have no written comments. And no hands are raised in the audience.
Okay, well, let's quickly get my agenda here. I think this is an information item, is it?
It is.
Yes. Well, very good. Well, that was a very good presentation. Thank you. I just, having been through this process on the ABAG exec board, dealing with their whole process of coming up with the numbers. It's lengthy. And there certainly are, I am very aware of how different cities are throughout the Bay Area as a result of that process, and recognize, particularly in Napa County, how unique our position is with respect to sites, with respect to capacity to build the housing, and at all levels. So it takes creative staff to do it. And I really appreciate our staff for their effort in being able to address those needs and work with our developer community. Actually, with our council has also had a very good economic study with the 5 principal developers, I think it was a month or so ago. It was very informative too about their vision, their plans for it. And I think we're just in a unique position in the Bay Area in terms of proximity to work. And I think that's an advantage we should take in terms of how we want to vision the future of the city. You know, if you got housing, you can draw business into town. You can draw corporate business into town. They need it for their workforce. And one of the big issues, of course, is the commute time. I mean, you know, God, let's face it, Novato to Vallejo, 5 p.m., 21 miles, takes an hour and 40 minutes. And you got to do that every day you work. Well, remote working now is certainly catching on in some areas, but there still needs to be that interface in the workplace. And I think we're in an opportunity now to reach out and tell the story of American Canyon for those businesses we want to attract in the corporate world. And housing is a big part of that. So thank you very much for your presentation this evening. Very informative. A lot of data to absorb, but certainly it certainly reflects a lot of American Canyon. Thank you.
Mayor, if I could do one more plug for the Napa Sonoma Collaborative.
Yes.
They prepared a tailored video in both English and Spanish that explains in very simple terms the housing element and the RENA allocation, and anybody that's watching, I would recommend if you check our housing element website. We have this wonderful work product, and it is from our friends there at the Napa Sonoma Collaborative. So
well, very good.
Really pleased with that.
We will need to get the information out to the community, be informed, catch up on it. Yeah, good.
Mr. Mayor, before you move on.
Councilmember Oro, yes.
I did have one thing to say, and that was the one thing I was going to say, Mr. Cooper, and I want to thank everybody for the presentation. I know I'm late here, but in my notes, I said, this video is amazing. So I would encourage you to go watch it because it really, really breaks down and explains why we do what we do in terms of trying to meet these RENA housing requirements. And I have just one request, both for Mr. He and Luke, if we could get the PowerPoint presentations that were done today, Brent, if you can make sure we get those will be helpful for us. Thank you.
All right. That has concluded this item. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Staff, for all the work you've done to make this a reality. Thank you. We'll check out the video. We'll move on now to management staff oral reports.
Thank you, Mayor. We'll keep Brent here. He's got an update for you. And Erica also has an update for you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor and Council Member. This is a
Sorry.
This is a segue from our last presentation. Just want to let you know, Luke mentioned stakeholder interviews. We're going to be scheduling a variety of them in the coming month related to the housing element to specifically speak to social service providers, market rate housing developers, affordable housing developers, and organizations that serve marginalized and special needs members of our community. And so we're going to be jumping right into that, along with participating in community events. Back to the Streets is on our list already. Thank you, Jen and Nicole, for getting us on the docket there. And then we'll also be having our Rincon. We'll be providing some topical workshops coming up in the next month or two And so we'll be letting everyone know all about that. And then finally, I want to do a shout out to our planning commission. They're just great. They volunteered also to help staff attend different pop-up events and help spread the word and get input on our housing elements. So like Luke said, we're in good hands, and it's really a great team.
All right. Well, it certainly was impressive with the work, the presentation done this evening. That's good. Thank you. Actually, the benefit of working in a coalition like that is you can borrow other good ideas from other people out there. We're not the only one trying to solve a problem. Or,
right, we're not alone. We've got help.
We're not alone. That's right. Yeah. Very good. Okay. Thank you.
Next, we have Public Works Director Smithies with an update for you.
Good evening. What's new in Public Works? Nope, I can't hear you.
There we go. Sorry about that.
There you go. All right.
Good evening. I just want to share that we have Public Works has deployed the upgraded wetlands and traffic calming project. If you've been out there, it's up and ready with speed cushions. I want to personally thank and for the police and fire departments, their coordinated efforts on this, as well as the community members that moved this project forward. It was a team effort. And we do have a survey on the city manager's update webpage on the city's website that we encourage the community to provide comments on the traffic calming project and any other input they have. It's a SurveyMonkey quick link online. So that's my updates for tonight. Thank you.
Well, I intentionally drove on Wetlands Edge to go experience the traffic cushions. They do make their presence known, but it's not that jarring thing you get going around the backside of Safeway. So certainly are effective. And I think, this, see how the community receives it, but I think it might be something we want to deploy in other areas where they're having the same issue out there. I mean, blows me away. I'm on Meldon and I'm going 25. I can see the sign up there and somebody's zipping past me on the left side, just going barreling down the road. This is not acceptable. It's not, come on, you're going to get to that stop sign. What? I can count it 7 seconds ahead of me. Yeah.
Mr. Mayor?
Really, I thank you for the effort, and we'll just monitor it. I think it obviously is effective.
Mr. Mayor, if I can ask a couple of questions. First, sure. If we can get a summary report that identifies roughly what's it cost to purchase and install all of that, so we have a sense of what we're talking about. And then secondly, I know some of the residents on Wetlands Edge have the ability to track the number of cars that go by and speed and so forth.
Yes, they do.
The idea being, can we actually identify whether or not it actually slows down speeds, or, if in 3 weeks they figure out how to, maneuver around the hump and keep going. So costs and effectiveness, if you could get us a report, that would be great.
The cost per location is approximately $12,000, and that is with labor to install them as well as materials. It's about $5,000 for materials per site and $7,000 for employment time. So $12,000 per location.
Yikes.
And I look forward to our members of the community to provide us feedback. We had a meeting in December, as some of you are aware, with the members that have the traffic counts. And it showed that there was a significant reduction in speeds. And so we do know it worked before, so I'll be interested in hearing the more feedback on the permanent solution.
Thank you.
Yeah, the workaround is you try and put the one wheel inside that little split between the two, and it still gets you on one side there. But yeah, with that, I don't know who's next. Councilmember Oro, Councilmember Walker.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, Leon, I'm sure you were burning rubber through there trying to make sure it worked. So,
well, I'll try it at 10. I'll try it at 20. 55. Wow, you get launched when you do that.
I'm just raising my hand here to comment on this. Like, if this is successful,
I would love, and Erica and Jason, I'm sure you're thinking already that where can we do this on the city? And I think the reason why was, you know, I think there was some vocal advocates on Wetlands Edge, and to their credit, they brought data with them and everything. But we know that others don't have such technology tools, but we know traffic is bad. Melvin Road being one of those. People are speeding through there. The west side of the western version of Highway 29 being it, James, Melvin, others. And I would love to see some of these speed mitigation efforts done across the city. And I'm hoping that we can, as a council and as staff, implement that sooner than later. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Washington.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I as well. I drove down there last week, this week, a couple of times to try to see if I could, you know, outsmart the speed bumps, and it does. It's very effective, very effective. And I spoke with Chief Cahill, and I also sat there and just observed for a while. Even when the fire engines went through. And I saw that it didn't really impact their vehicle because of the span of their wheel well. And they were able to avoid having to have any impact to mess up their gear. And that's my biggest thing from a public safety standpoint. I just wanna make sure from a public safety standpoint that we can still respond in emergency situations and get there. Now, it may not be the same for the police department. The patrol cars are just as, you know, like any other car, so they will hit it. But the turnaround on the expense, the cost of replacing a rig versus a patrol car there's a huge delta between that. So just knowing that part makes sense to me. But there is no way you ride down that street at 50 miles an hour and don't impact your vehicle. So I think it's a good thing. I think that the people, the community that got involved to advocate for this, I understand what they were talking about. And to Councilmember Oral's point, there are other areas in our city that may need the same thing. But these same speed bumps won't be effective in certain areas. So evaluating it is important. You know, getting public safety's input is important. And then we'll still have the occasional resident complaining about, you know, hey, you know, my car maintenance or the impact to my car. But it's about the overall, addressing the overall effect for the community. And I think this was a right decision for that area. All areas may not qualify for it, but yeah, I think that it's good. And I like the fact that the community got involved in it, because we are listening to what you're saying out there. So thank you.
Thank you. Yes, go ahead.
I wanted to add that we do also have a local roadway safety plan in the works that was approved in the mid-year budget approval. That will be starting soon. We are anticipating a lot of public input because it'll be looking at the high corridors such as Melvin, the high use corridor of Donaldson, Newell, all these different corridors, and then they're going to look at the traffic evaluation as far as accidents. We also received word last week that we were awarded a complete street assessment. It'll be going tandem and concurrent, but it's going to be looking at pedestrian and bicycle traffic calming, intersection treatments, kind of like, there's going to be a really robust effort this year between that grant award through Berkeley Safety Track. That's a consultant will be doing that project, and then other consultants will look at a roadway safety plan, but definitely coordination between the two efforts going on there. And we have our speed survey going on this year. It's supposed to be updated about every 5 years. So that will be budgeted in the next fiscal year, July 1. So we have a lot of things going on this year, and just, I should have shared that along with the traffic comments. So thank you for reminding.
Thank you. We look forward to that. Okay, anything further, Mr. Hall?
I think maybe Councilmember Washington had raised his hand again.
Oh,
I hadn't put it down yet. I don't know.
No, I just had a quick question. I know that some of the people from that area had mentioned to me that we still didn't agendize a traffic survey safety suggestions. I just want to make sure that we did get that on calendar somehow.
Yeah, we don't have something on the calendar at the moment, but we are looking at what we want to bring forward. It's we're still, I think, trying to figure out what that is going to take the place. I know these two grant programs that the Director Smithies referenced will involve a lot of public engagement, and so it will probably line up with something that feels like a kickoff for those processes. An engagement on the front of those processes, but we still got to kind of sort that out.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. I just want to be able to go back and explain to them that we haven't forgotten about them.
Yep.
And if I can add to that, I think one of the issues related to the traffic calming process itself, our process, how do you get sign off and all that? So I think another part of it is just that administrative process that needs to be looked at.
No, that's a fair point, Councilor Joseph, and I'm glad you brought that up. And Director Smithies referenced this before, but we have a survey on our website, and it's a very short survey about this particular project. But we want people's input because we've already seen a divergence of responses. Folks who live nearby have one perspective. People who don't live nearby have a different perspective on these devices, and so it kind of paints the picture as to why we have a bit of an exhaustive process because. The feelings are very strong kind of one way or another, and it tends to correlate to whether how often you have to drive a corridor or whether you live nearby. So we're trying to get some interesting data on that, and that will help inform any changes maybe that we'll have in our process.
Thank you.
But we need people to fill out the survey because right now it's somewhat of a low sample size. So that's really helpful. I just want to, before we transition over to Ally, I did want to again thank Chief Cahill. Having a progressive fire chief as it relates to response and looking at the entire picture of what a community deals with and has to live with is extraordinarily helpful. So I just want to appreciate him and his willingness to look at this as a solution for the community and find a way for his group at the fire department to adapt and to not make their be willing to try and to explore those options, and we couldn't have done it without them. So again, thanks to Chief Cahill.
You raised a good point there. We need to sure we're checking in with the fire department, finding out the impact. The benefit obviously is there, but is it as Councilmember Washington pointed out, what's the response time? We want to make sure that we're not impacting that adversely.
Exactly. With that, Mayor, we'll turn it over to Park and Rec Director Akita.
Okay.
Thanks, Jason. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. I would like to share with all of you a few updates. So our American Canyon Middle School select basketball teams, both the boys and the girls, took first place this past weekend at their basketball tournament. So we're really excited about that. They have 2 more tournaments this coming month, so we wish them the best of luck in those tournaments. Also, as a reminder, our March 10th PCS meeting has been canceled. Instead, we will be holding a joint PCS and OSAC meeting tomorrow evening, March 2nd at 6:30 p.m. You can join us via Zoom. The link can be found on our public meeting calendar, as well as the agenda. On Sunday, March 6th, ACCPF will be holding an open house from 4 to 6 p.m. at the Boys and Girls Club. On March 10th through the 12th, the American Canyon Friends of the Library will be holding a book sale at the American Canyon Library. In partnership with Seroptimist, we will be hosting a St. Patrick's Day Bash at the Adult Activity Center on March 17th from 4:30 to 6 p.m. For more information, please call us during our business hours. And on March 23rd, Napa County will be holding a COVID-19 vaccination clinic for participants for patients 5 years and older from 3 to 6 p.m. Visit myturn.ca.gov to schedule an appointment. And the LGBTQ Connection is calling for all creatives, visionaries, and leaders within our community who would like to join their youth leadership team, ages 14 to 24. For more information, please visit the LGBTQ Napa. And Kiwanis will be hosting a crowd feed this month. Mark or Leon, you may want to add additional information about that. Thank you.
Well, thank you for your report.
That's all, Mayor. That's all we have. Thank you.
With we do need the rain, but I can't complain about the weather. And certainly this time of year, we've got a lot more activities outside. I don't know, Mark is fellow Kiwanian, comments on the crab feed. You have a lot to do with the organizing of that. So.
Yes, thank you. As long as I've been invited to make the plug, I'm going to take advantage of it. You still can buy tickets until this Friday at midnight. Go online to amcankiwanis.org, and then you can find the links into the online ticket sales, as well as our online auction, which the auction will go until next Wednesday or Thursday, March 10th. So you can still buy tickets, and definitely you can go online and bid, just like with voting, bid high and bid often. Thank you for the opportunity to remind everybody it's not too late.
All right, very good. Councilmember Washington?
Yeah, I want to mention that on one of the Kiwanis crab feeds, I actually won 2 years ago a capsule for wine for 4 people. And just to let you know, Councilmember Joseph, I've called the castle and they said they're still honoring my my winnings. So they said that because of COVID, they know they had closed it all down. But you could win, and you could if provided we don't have COVID continuing on with us, you can use your winnings, and I will still be using my winnings, and I won that. Thank you, Nick.
All right. Well, you go, Guy. And even the dinner for 10 that was offered up and got kind of COVID, whatever, that's still going to be honored as well. So yes, COVID did screw things up, but we're still honoring our commitments. Thank you.
There you are. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, I look forward to that. I think there's gonna be a lot more activity. It's great to be finally working our way out of this COVID restrictions and getting life some back to semblance of normal. All right. Anything further from staff management oral reports? Very good. Well, we'll move on to Mayor Council Committee reports, and then we'll take up future agenda items after that. So we have written reports from Councilmember Pierre Washington. Anything further to add to your report?
Nothing more to add to the report. Just want to say, perhaps before we end, we just have a quick moment of silence for what's going on in Ukraine, and also the families that lost loved ones in Sacramento, the 3 young girls who lost their lives today. Just keeping them in memory in our hearts and prayers.
Thank you for that. Okay. Councilmember Joseph, anything further?
Nothing more to add. And I would agree with Councilmember Washington. These are getting to be goofy times, and hopefully we'll all be safe, but it's getting harder and harder to feel comfortable about that. So thank you.
Councilmember Oro?
No, I don't have anything for this report, but the next report I will have plenty. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Well, mine was with reflection on events in Ukraine, and had a contractor I was working with met him for the first time on Friday. They had an accent, what's identified as something East European. Turns out he's Ukrainian, and he immigrated many years ago. But his mother-in-law, his wife's mother, is in Kyiv, and they're dealing with all that. So there's a lot of angst, a lot of worry, a lot of tears. Phone call back and forth is how they stay in touch, but she's in a very vulnerable position. And I would agree, we need to recognize that impact on people. It's horrible. There's no other way to describe it. The cost of human life will continue to mount. But whatever we can from our perspective for supporting those. This gentleman lives in down in Concord. Apparently there is a bit of a Ukrainian community in that area, and there are throughout the Bay Area. So our hearts go out to them, and in any way we can support them in their efforts to find solace, find help for themselves and their families. I saw the news a couple of times on the family situation where the 3 girls were shot to death by their father. You know, domestic violence is a huge issue. Huge issue. And this is just the tragic outcome of that type of a situation. We need to be aware of it in our community. Certainly in my professional work for years, most of the staff I work with were women. And domestic violence is an issue that doesn't stay at home, it comes to work too, the impact of it. So I think it requires us to make sure that we are mindful about that and the services are available and that we reach out to help those who are in need. So yes, I would agree. Thoughts and prayers should be there for in these situations at this time. Attended the Blue and Gold event for Cub Scouts. It's their annual promotion. Loads of fun out there at Shenandoah Park. Brings back memories just a few years ago when I was a Cub Scout. The boys are having a great time. Actually, it's boys and girls. Scouting now included girls in the program, and great move in that direction. And as I often remark, there's things you will learn there in those activities that you will not learn anywhere else. As a Boy Scout, my first merit badge I earned was beekeeping. Think about that. ACCPF, all the hearts were sold. Got to find out if I got mine yet. So we'll keep working on that. With respect to city type business, well, the flood board today had their finance report, their audit. Works on that, so that's always good to know. What's happening with the county has got, they're starting to dredge the river again. So that's a piece that, don't know how much of that affects us down here in terms of the turbidity in the water. So that's, well, that would conclude my, I'd wrap it up there. So thank you. Anything on future agenda items, Council colleagues? Councilmember Joseph.
More of a clarification. I think somewhere I read that we've got a joint planning council session in the near future. And if that's the case, or if not, perhaps we should consider it at least to discuss the general plan update and the urban limit line. So if I can get some clarification, it's more of a, not so much adding something, but clarifying that it's in the works.
Yeah, it's in the works. We don't have it scheduled yet, though, Councilmember Joseph. So it's something we ought to do. We need to check back with our consultant team and figure out when a good time to do that would be.
Good, because sooner than better, or sooner than later, because it's going to take a lot of time to work that thing through, and the sooner we start talking about it, the better. Thank you.
All right. That concludes future agenda items. Anything further for the greater good? Well, thank you all. It's been a very productive evening. Good reports on our accomplishments and future plans. So I thank you all for your effort this evening. And that would conclude our evening. We are adjourned.
Good night, American Canyon. Be safe.
Good night.
Good night.